we are going to turn our cameos from this into this. Now, I've developed a template, so I'm going to be sharing that in a link in the description, but let's go over how to use the template. I've set it up using a 12 by 20 format, so if you want to just cut it straight out of a piece of vinyl, you're welcome to do that. You can even take the mat off if you want to as well, no problem. If you would like to have something fun set up, so now what I'm going to do is I actually want a little bit of a leopard print pattern on the one side. I'm not going to decorate the entire thing. I'm going to be using the side panel, the left-hand side panel, and I'm going to be putting something on the middle panel as well. So let's start off by welding the template. So we have our individual assets, and this section I'm going to use a pattern fill, and I have a leopard print pattern fill here somewhere. There we go. So I want to change it a little bit, so I'm going to scale it. I'm quite happy with that. So now I'm going to actually trace it so that we can get those parts, because if we had to send this to cut right now, it's just a colorful. So the color doesn't actually mean anything. So we need to trace it if we want to cut it like that. So let's change the threshold. Let's increase it a little bit, and then we can click trace. Now we can see we have our panel trace, but we want to clean it up a little bit. So I'm going to zoom in on the bottom part, and I'm going to weld it again so that it changes it into individual elements. And I'm going to be deleting these little straggler pieces here, just to make the design a little bit easier to work with. Once we're done cleaning up the edges, I'm going to just zoom out so that I see the entire part. I'm going to select everything, make it a compound path, then I'm going to double click and simplify the points so that it cuts a little bit better. So we have that one. And in this template, as you can see, there are a few different lines here. So this one is one, if you were to use this top part, where it's obviously the word Cameo comes up there, and it's got a little bit of an offset. So you'll have a little bit of a gap between the word and the rest of the template. This one is obviously if you want to cover the word, and that one is if you want to have the word just visible. And then of course you have this one where all the different buttons show up. So those are little spaces so the buttons can show. But I'm only going to be using this one, and like I mentioned, I'm going to be using this one for another design. So I'm actually going to move all of these off to the side, and I'm going to be importing the design that I want to use for that one. So here is the SVG that I have, and I'm just going to move it all out the way so that I can resize it. Take that out, and I'm going to group it and just resize it a little bit there so that we know that we're actually cutting the right size. How I'm going to cut this is I'm actually going to do this as a matless cut. So I'm going to go to the setup panel. I'm going to change my mat from 12 by 24 to none, because obviously if we're not cutting with a mat, we need to turn the mat option off. So I'm going to change the orientation to portrait again, and then I'm going to change the orientation of my design to sideways. I've already got my weeding box around my design, but I will also put a weeding box around this one. If you don't have Designer Edition to be able to create weeding boxes, you can just use the box tool, and then you can kind of create your own weeding boxes. Okay, so this is the vinyl that I'm going to be using. As you can see, it is very beautiful. But with the setup of this, I want to make sure that the color gradient is being shown on the panel like that. I don't want the color gradient to run on that side panel just a little bit. I want to see all of the colors. So I've changed the orientation of the side panel to how it is now, just to make sure that I can see all of those colors. So if you're using vinyl like this that has specific colors or gradients in it, then that's something that you might want to keep in mind. Now I need to turn the cut borders on just to make sure that I'm actually going to be cutting within the lines, because that's very important. So this design can move down a little bit more and a little bit further up so we don't waste too much vinyl, because obviously this stuff is quite expensive. There we go. So everything's set up, and now we just need to check that everything is correct in the send panel. So we're going to change the material to holographic adhesive. It's the same vinyl as the holographic adhesive, so I know the cut setting will be all right. And I can see here in this little section here that these lines are actually overlapping each other, which is a little bit of a problem because it will cut out funny. So I'm going to go back to the design panel, and I'm actually going to weld everything, because then that means that that line, if we go back to the send panel and if we zoom in super closely again, we can see that that overlap is now gone. So if you have things that are overlapping each other, you can always weld it. If you're using just plain text, you won't need to. So let's get the Cameo set up and let's get it cut. A super important part to cutting without a mat is to remember to change this. You will need to pull that lever down as it pulls that bar up, and then you need to press that grey button in and move your roller across. So you will see there are these two grooves. If you're cutting with a mat, your roller will be slotted into that groove. If you're cutting without a mat, your roller will be slotted into this groove. So you just need to listen for the click. It's very faint, but you will hear it when you are doing this yourself, and it will need to line, the roller should line up with that arrow. And then you are ready to load your vinyl. Okay, so now that that's all done, we can now start applying everything, which is super exciting. Before we get started with any applications, because we've been touching this at certain points where they've obviously got grubby paw marks everywhere. So we need to make sure that there are no grubby paw marks so that our vinyl can adhere properly to this section. And for that purpose, I like to use little alcohol swabs. I think that these are particularly useful because they come in little packets and you can use them in little bits, and we can just swab there, get all the dirty little grubby paw marks off and the dust, and then rub down the rest of the Cameo as well. We're not going to apply anything to the top, but might as well. So you see all that dirt that came off? It's probably mostly dust anyway. Then of course we need some transfer tape. So I'm just going to roll it up so we can get to the edge. Place the transfer tape on, cut it off. I want to make sure that it's the same width as this so that I can use it for both, because I don't want to waste transfer tape. I've got lots, but that doesn't mean we have to waste it. Then we burnish it on. Turn it over, pull the backing off the page, and then we can apply it. So obviously you want to make sure that everything lines up 100%. So it's a bit tricky. If you want to use the application method that I showed in my one video, if you're looking for that link, I will link it up at the top. There we go. You can even burnish this on while you have the transfer tape on, just to give it a little bit of an additional protection to the vinyl. And there we go. It looks beautiful. Love it! I might actually even just do it across everything because I think it looks so cool. We can use the same transfer tape for this section. We will obviously need a little bit extra for that, but at least we won't need much extra. So if you do have things that it goes over on one section, then at least you can use a little bit of extra spare tape. Again, flip it over. Beautiful. The silhouette logo at the bottom is in the middle. So that's actually a perfect kind of halfway point. Or if you want to as well, you can always fold it in half like that, right? So that it's almost exactly in the middle. That's where your halfway point is on your vinyl. You can hold that there, and then you know where your halfway point is. So I'm just going to use that as a guide and plonk it down. Now with this one, we got to be a little bit more careful because it's not as rigid as that. So I wouldn't give it too much pressure. And if you do give pressure, then just support it from the back. I like to always use the light at an angle to kind of see any sections of the vinyl that haven't properly been stuck down, just so I know where I need to burnish it. It's not a high use section, so it's not really going to be a problem. But the problem is that now that I'm looking at that, I really want to do this as well as have that matching. I just think it looks so pretty. And then I save these pieces of transfer tape for later. I'm definitely going to do the other parts. And now we are finally ready to put all of this onto the Cameo. Let's start off with this bit. And we're just going to wipe off all of the edges. Turn over the paper, pull the paper off. This particular pattern that I have is difficult to see where those things go, but we can kind of see where the 3 sections are and the 3 button things are down there. We can also even plug the machine in and turn it on so we can see where the buttons go. There we go, that looks great. We're going to burnish it a little bit. I'm going to turn it off so that it doesn't yell at me. And then we pull that back. And then again, use the light just to check to see that there are no bubbles, which there are a few. It's kind of what happens when you weed it, and the weeding, you kind of pull it up a little bit sometimes. I obviously don't want to press too hard on this because it is the touch screen, but I just want to make sure that it's working and that all the vinyl is stuck down. Perfect. Now for the next section. So I had to cut this in 2 strips just because I didn't want to use my 12 by 24 mat again. And also I didn't have a piece that I wanted to cut that was the right length. So I kind of just split it in 2 and tried to gauge the color. It looks okay. I'm not going to lie. It's not the best. It should function fine. I'm going to put this piece of transfer tape on first, right to the edge. So I'm going to place that, line everything up, burnish that on a little bit. Okay. Take that off. Then I'm going to place the spit just to make sure that everything is right. Okay, burnishing that down. This little piece actually going to put there. It looked a little bit bare. And there we go. We can obviously now see the entire machine set up and decorated. As you can see, it leaves gaps for all of the lights, so you can press all of the buttons if you need to. There we see those buttons, and then the pause button will be in the middle, and it is just pretty much a perfect template to be able to decorate your Cameo. I hope you enjoyed watching me decorate my Cameo and got inspired to do your own. Thank you very much for joining me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel for more of this kind of content in the future, and I hope to see you in my next video. And remember, be kind to someone today. See you soon.